Welcome back to The Explainer. Now today, we're tackling something intense. We're diving into one of the most shocking and honestly, one of the most gruesome tales from classic medieval literature.
I want you to just imagine this for a second. A woman has just finished a delicious meal, she's praised it, and her husband just looks her dead in the eye and says those words. That which you have eaten was in good sooth the heart of Sieur Guilhem de Cabestanh.
An absolutely bone-chilling revelation, which, leads to the obvious question. How on earth does a love story end up here, with an act of horrific, forced cannibalism? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
All right, so to really get what's happening, we've got to go back, way back to the beginning. The whole story kicks off with two knights in the region of Provence, in medieval France.
So let's meet our players. First, you've got Sieur Guilhem de Roussillon. He's the husband. Then there's his best friend, Sieur Guilhem de Cabestanh. And right in the middle of it all is the lady, Roussillon's wife. And the story makes it super clear these guys weren't just pals. They were like brothers, doughty warriors who fought side by side.
Yeah, but you know how these stories go. This deep friendship is about to take a seriously fatal turn. Cabestanh becomes, and this is the actual phrasing, inordinately enamored of his friend's wife. And she's into it. She returns his passion, and they start this secret affair, meeting up whenever they can, totally driven by this love that the text says made them yearn and burn for each other.
Of course, a secret this big is almost impossible to keep. Their affair was handled, and I'm quoting here, with so little discretion that 'twas discovered by the husband. And when he finds out, his deep love for his friend just flips, instantly turning to mortal enmity. But this is where it gets really chilling. He doesn't confront them, he hides his rage, he pretends everything is fine, all while he starts plotting this truly terrible revenge.
And his plan? Oh, it's just cold, calculated, and absolutely vicious. Step 1, he lures his friend out with a fake invitation to his castle. Step 2, he sets up an ambush in the woods on the path his friend has to take. Step 3, as the unarmed Cabestanh rides up, Roussillon just leaps out, yells, "Thou art a dead man," and runs him through with a lance. And step 4, in the most horrific act of all, he gets off his horse and carves his former friend's heart out with his own 2 hands.
Roussillon then rides back to his castle holding the heart, and he gives his cook this absolutely bone-chilling order. "Here is a boar's heart. Take it, and make thereof the daintiest and most delicious dish thou canst."
So, picture the dinner scene. The wife has no idea what's happened. She gets served this special dish. Her husband, meanwhile, is so engrossed with his crime he can barely eat. But the lady? She thinks it's delicious. So delicious, in fact, that she eats the whole thing. And it's only then, after her plate is clean, that her husband leans in and asks how she liked it, setting the stage for that horrifying reveal.
So that dinner scene is just wow. But to really understand this story, we have to pull back a bit. Because here's the thing, this shocking tale wasn't something Boccaccio just made up for the Decameron in the 14th century.
Now, its roots go way back into the world of the troubadours. Now, if you're not familiar, a troubadour was basically a poet-musician back in southern France, and they wrote and performed all these songs, usually about courtly love. And it turns out, the hero of our story, Guilhem de Cabestanh, was actually based on a real-life troubadour from the late 12th century.
So you can really see the journey this legend took. It starts in the late 12th century, with the real guy, the troubadour. Then, for the next century or so, this eaten heart legend just spreads like wildfire all across medieval Europe. It becomes this really popular, grisly folktale. And finally, in the mid-14th century, the Italian writer Boccaccio takes this famous story and retells it with his own stark, unforgettable style.
Okay, but this brings up a huge question, right? Why would anyone want to hear a story this gruesome? I mean, what's the point? Well, the answer actually gets at something much, much deeper.
For us, it's easy to look at this and think it's just for shock value, like a medieval horror movie. But that's not what was going on at all. In medieval literature, the horror wasn't there for cheap thrills. The horror is the point.
And that point is wrapped up in this idea called a moral exemplum. It sounds fancy, but think of it like an ethical thought experiment. You take a scenario and you push it to its absolute, most extreme limit, all to reveal some kind of profound truth about us, about human nature.
So here's the bottom line. The story isn't really about a guy getting his heart eaten. That's the device.
The story uses that ultimate horror to make us confront what jealousy really is when you take it all the way to its logical conclusion. And the answer it gives us? It's monstrosity. Pure and simple.
Okay, so let's go back to that dinner table. Because the wife's reaction when her husband tells her the truth, that's what turns this story from just a brutal revenge tale into something else entirely.
See, up to this point, the lady's been pretty passive in the story, right? She's the object of one man's love and another man's jealousy. But in this one moment, after the reveal, she completely transforms. She's no longer a victim. She becomes the one in control of her own fate. She turns into the symbol of absolute loyalty, a figure of what the text calls terrible dignity.
She doesn't scream. She doesn't fall apart. After a moment, she just looks right at her husband and delivers this incredible, defiant declaration. But God forbid that fare of such high excellence as the heart of a knight so true and courteous be followed by aught else. I mean, wow. She's basically saying, nothing will ever pass my lips again after a meal so perfect. And she means it. With those words, she just steps back to a high window right behind her and lets herself fall backwards to her death. And the story presents this not as an act of despair, but as her final, powerful choice. It's her way of preserving the purity of her love and refusing to live in the world her husband's monstrosity created.
And after that, things happen fast. The husband, totally stunned and probably terrified of what's coming, he flees. The next day, when the local people hear the whole story, they recover the two bodies. And in a final bit of poetic justice, they bury the two lovers together in the same tomb.
So what are we supposed to take away from all this? I think it's that a really gruesome story can be so much more than just horror. It can be this incredibly powerful statement about love, about loyalty, and about the absolutely devastating consequences of jealousy. And that brings us to one last little detail. In the Decameron, the book this story is from, the tales are told by a group of friends, and each day one person is chosen as the king for the day. The guy who chooses to tell this story is named Filostrato, so I'll leave you with this to chew on. What does it say about him that this is the story he chose to tell, the most extreme, the most disturbing one of all?